Now, before this chat, we were just going through a little bit of research almost in our heads about players that played in grand finals for St Kilda and another club. And Darryl Wakelin is one of what we think is about 10 or 11 that have done that over the journey. And unfortunately won a premiership with the second one at Port Adelaide, but obviously not at the Saints back in 1997. Recruited from South Australia via the Adelaide Crows, played 115 games for the Saints before playing 146, including the 2004 premiership, where Alistair Lynch tried to knock him into next week. Darryl Wakelin, thanks very much for joining us.
Absolute pleasure.
Now, interesting journey for you. Obviously, your brother arrived at St Kilda. You went to Adelaide, and then obviously a couple of years later, you were reunited at the Saints. Can you sort of take us through what that was like, and how much did it even help you upon your move to St Kilda, knowing that Shane had already done it?
Yeah, look, it was an interesting journey at the start. I did a pre-season with the Crows as a 17-year-old out of the Till. What was originally the Till Cup, the under-18 competition back then. So got a taste for a pre-season. It was the Crows' second season. And in history, will say that I didn't get picked up at that stage as a 17-year-old, but they actually drafted me in a pre-season draft 2 years later. Actually, Shane was picked up in '92 draft. It was an excellent draft, that '92 draft, but I had a knee injury that year. So I didn't get picked up in that national draft and got picked up in the pre-season draft the following year in '93. So a short stint at Adelaide for about 8 months, I think it was, and didn't play any games, wasn't contracted back in the days of a list of 52. So, yeah, that sort of, I think it lit the fire in the belly a fair bit, knowing that I'd had a bit of a taste of it. I'd been on a list for a period. I wasn't quite ready. I knew I just needed to get my body right, get as fit as I could, and give it another crack. And that's what I did at the SANFL level.
Darryl, that '93 Crows team was pretty good, but how close did you get to making a debut with Adelaide in '93, '94? Yeah,
look, I think there was maybe about 8 or 10 players that went on to play over 200 games from that Till Cup years. So that '93 season, you had the likes of Ben Hart, Mark Rasciuto, Sanderson, quite a few of them, Sean Wellman, guys that went on to have quite amazing careers. So it was really my priority to get a game with Port Adelaide at the time. Port Adelaide were a very good team. They'd won 5 premierships of the last over the last 6-7 years. So that really was my priority. And at the time, I was playing more of as a ruck. I was an undersized ruckman. So I really had to adjust through them years to becoming, trying to really find a position, if you like. And that's how I played majority centre-half forward, and that's what I was recruited to Adelaide for. So didn't really get close to getting a game that year. There's certainly a lot better players playing more consistent footy. And then I got injured and I missed about 3 months of footy. So, yeah, it's a bit of a long answer to your short question. I was a fair way off that year. '94 was the season I got very fit and had a good season SANFL, and we won the premiership that year.
There's a possible story about that. Had the license gone to Port Adelaide rather than Fremantle, the chances are you may have held on and tried to go straight into Port Adelaide, and that means you would never have joined St Kilda in that case. Is there much truth behind that story?
Yeah, spot on. I mean, you've been doing your homework. Outstanding.
I heard it a while back. Yeah.
Yeah, it's good to reflect on that period. I mean, Port Adelaide was a really us against them as a Port Adelaide player and supporter. So through that period, there was a promise. Obviously, I played in that premiership in '94 in the local league, and through the trade, long story short, I got to, as we'll probably get to, I got to go to St Kilda because I'd been listed before. Fremantle could list me on their original list, but they done a deal to list me and then on-trade me through the Lockett deal through Sydney to Melbourne. But what actually happened, Port thought they were going to go in '96, But there was also some rumblings saying that, Freo would come in for that 95 season. That was all set to go. And then really there was probably about 10 of us Magpies guys at that time that were a chance to maybe play AFL in that next couple of years. But I just had the attitude right from the start, rightly or wrongly, that I would go to Melbourne, take that opportunity with St Kilda. If I couldn't get a kick, if I wasn't good enough, at least I'd find out where I was at. I knew St Kilda were going to give me an opportunity to play sort of centre half back, full back. And I thought I'd watched my brother play there, my twin brother, and I thought, why not? Why can't I do that? And I was nearly 20 at that stage. I was 20, so I didn't want to waste any more time, and I had to get over there, give it a best crack, and the worst that could happen, it wasn't successful. I'd go back to Adelaide and get another opportunity when the AFL team come in.
I guess those early St Kilda days, so you arrived from what was effectively at that stage a one-team city in Adelaide. Port hadn't come into the AFL yet, as we said. Obviously, you went into the Melbourne Fishbowl. You played for St Kilda pretty much immediately. They were in their second season under Stan Alves with the likes of Ozzie Jones and Joel Smith and Tony Brown and Matthew Lappin and all of these youngsters coming in. What was that experience like, and how did it compare to Adelaide?
Look, Port Adelaide were a very professional club, very successful club. Obviously, St Kilda had lacked success, but they had made some pretty brave moves with that trade with Lockett, which allowed that 95 season was my first season, obviously, and Tony Brown arrived through that draft. Joel Smith, Ozzie Jones, Robbie Neal came down from Sydney as part of that deal. So they added a whole lot of youth. Matty Lappin was already there. A year later, Maxie Hudgton come on board. My twin brother Shane was obviously there. And then we had the blend of the more senior experienced guys who were probably around that stage. They were probably 27, 28. Lowe, Harvey, Burke, Winmar, Shanahan, and Spud Frawley was coming to the back end of his career. So it was a really nice blend of youth, and I think that was a massive part of why we shot up the ladder over that following 2 or 3 years.
A little bit of a two-parter, but you've come into the AFL. You've played 21 games in your first year. You must have felt like it's actually pretty easy. Like all those question marks is whether were you good enough, were answered pretty quickly, and then kind of a year later you win the first piece of silverware for the footy club in forever with the Ansett Cup. And what was the mood around the club at that point? And were those older blokes that you mentioned, Harvey, Lowe, Burke, what was their messaging around, I guess, what happens now after winning the preseason cup?
Yeah, look, there was huge expectations. Stewie Lowe made a big call to stay. He got offered a massive contract to go across to Freo at the end of that 95, sort of 96 period. Might even been the start of 95, but there was a real sense that we had a very good spine. We had some, as we said, we had that youth and experience. Look, a lot of us young guys, we were very naive. We were just trying to get a game. I see the kids these days; they seem so much more knowledgeable and such a better understanding of where they fit in the whole scheme. But for us, it was Saturday football, and it was a social Saturday night. And as serious as we did take our football, absolutely, and we trained hard, it was just a very different time. So, yeah, we had expectations, but I'll tell you what, Moorabbin was a tired old place, and we used to play it at Waverley, which was the coldest place ever, as you remember. And it was just really, I still felt that it was just adjusting to the Melbourne lifestyle and really balancing, trying to be a young lad and with trying to be a semi-professional footballer at that time. So, excuse me, guys. And that's what it was about. We had lots of fun. I probably didn't appreciate at the time just the quality of the guys we were playing with. When you talk about some of them names, that absolute legends of AFL over the whole history, Winmar, Burke, Harvey, Lowe. And not that you have regrets, but certainly that's probably one of them ones you look back on and you think, gee, I wish I could have played in a flag with them guys, let alone my twin brother and them great, really good young kids we were coming through with, but especially for them senior players at the time who, they're just legends of the club. So when you reflect back, that's probably the most disappointing thing for that period.
You're talking about having fun and playing with Shane and all that. Now, generally it's the forwards who will try, I guess, sneaky things to try and put off the defenders or whatever. Was there any stages where you sort of just ducked onto your brother's opponent and just to try and mix it up and just to put them off their game a little bit? And just, was there any sort of that kind of thing, and or where I'm taking this player today or anything like that, you sort of just worked with each other?
We certainly, the first 2 seasons, Shane was more of a forward, and I was obviously drafted as a backman, but he would play centre half back and sort of centre half forward. So it was probably until 98 where we both played down back together. It was sort of a bit of a switch. It was more of a match-up thing. We knew each other's game. We knew who would match up better on certain forwards. So we certainly used to swap it around a little bit. And in saying that, some days you wouldn't quite be on your game, so you'd help each other in a way like that. But it'll certainly come back to the matchups and how best you thought you matched up against a certain individual. And that was more as we played more and more together down back from sort of that 98 season onwards in that last 2 or 3 years. So whereas, as you recall, coming into that 97 season, and Shane was really a forward, played some very good games late in the year when Barry Hall was injured. Obviously, Jason Heatley in really good touch in that 97 season. And, as I said, as history will show, Shane was unlucky and was an emergency for that 97 grand final. But, some really high-quality football we played in 97. That 96, getting back to your question, 96 was probably, we just didn't get the start to that season we would have liked, and build some consistency and build, 3 or 4 wins in a row. I think even though we'd won that Ansett Cup pre-season grand final, I still think there was a level of doubt. There was quite a number of us boys were 20, 21 years of age and hadn't quite fully believed in how good that we could be as individuals and as a team.
So Shane, as you say, kicked 4 against Collingwood late in 97 and a match-winning role forward and very close. Grand final 1997. Can you sort of take us through your memories of that day? And I guess the second part of that question, how tough was it knowing that obviously your twin brother, who you're so close to, wasn't a part of that? In the back of your mind, you're thinking, I might be about to play in a premiership, and he would miss out.
Yeah, look, that was heartbreaking at the time. It was really sad, but at the same time, you were so focused on your own game leading into finals, and you were hoping that he would somehow, that 4-goal effort, I think it was against Collingwood from memory. So, yeah. And I felt that could have been at least got him a position on the bench, with the 4-man bench, and just got him. I knew how good a finals player he was as a junior, playing reserves and league footy back home. I knew he just thrived on that and played a lot of his forward as a centre half forward, but also at half back. But his best finals games were as a forward. So that was probably the disappointing thing, that he at least didn't get an opportunity to be there. I think he would have been very handy in that grand final, just as a bit of a swingman, whether we needed someone else down back, and as another forward. So it was sort of a bit that sort of a very sad feeling for him not to get that opportunity, and at the same time you're fully focused on what you needed to do as an individual at the same time.
What were some of the things that both of you guys, and you and Shane, but more specifically you, had to work on or kind of came to realise that needed to get better at post that 97 season and the heartbreak of grand final day? What was the reaction to the loss, I guess, amongst the rest of the team, but also for you?
Personally, I had to be. thought I had to become a more positive attacking player. I just needed to be a bit more of a ball player. And that comes from confidence. That comes with understanding what ability you have, which I think in that leading into 98 and then into 99, I thought we developed that. But what it also showed was that there's always good sides around. There's always sides coming up the ladder. There was some great sides back then. Remember, like Adelaide had such an amazing run through both final series, 97, 98, but you had the likes of Essendon who were still around the mark and really coming. You had, North Melbourne were an incredible side. So you had Brisbane around the mark and really starting to come to the fore and a lot of experience. So there was always good sides coming up. We had an amazing run coming into that 97 final series. And when you get a run like that, you just have to take it. And, as the grand final show, we just didn't do enough in that second quarter to really stretch it out to it could have been out to a five goal lead at half time. So, Adelaide had some incredible, AFL life members, Hall of Fame guys in that team. And so some of them early in their career, but it showed they had a huge amount of talent in that team. They had a pretty handy coach. But yeah, as a whole, I thought we were tracking well. But we needed a really strong leader and coach to really keep that group together tight, and senior leaders to keep us tight. And probably at the time we probably did looking back on it, we got ahead of ourselves, and probably rated ourselves, and we didn't prepare as well as certainly coming into that past 98. We didn't prepare. Stan Howes was great for the group. He kept that discipline within that group. He did get knocked for some of his behaviour in that 98 season, which cost him his job. And maybe the club at that time felt, well, they've got this great group of young and old. The clock's ticking. We need getting a different coach in here can really take it to that next level, which it did for about 10 weeks of that 99 season. I think we were sitting top halfway through the season, 10-1 or 10-2, something like that.
That's pretty much exactly where I was going to go next. I was going to ask you there with the transition from Alves to Watson. How did the situation of Stan Alves pan out in your view? What did you see happening? What did you know what was going on before it happened? There's a report of there was a bit of a coup from the players, and how did you see it all unfold?
Yeah, I was part of the leadership group coming into that. So post-season, obviously that 98 series, we played finals. I was injured in that first final against Sydney. We just went down to Sydney from memory, and then we got put out by Melbourne at the MCG, where we played pretty ordinary. So I think we went out in straight sets from memory. And I remember it was pretty much Mad Monday, and there was a few whispers going around, which I thought was just really weird. I had no idea. I was very naive to it all. And I love Stan as a coach. We got on very well. I was very committed to him as a young kid. He gave me great opportunity. And I loved his discipline. I loved his structure of the team, the way he brought the team together and had some real structure and discipline, which we needed with a young group, and we needed with some of the guys we brought into the club. We just needed that. That group needed that discipline and consistency and real structure to our training. And it come right out of the blue. I was really disappointed when Stan left, and I suppose leading into the 99 season with Tim was announced at the end of that year, straight off the Channel 7 sports desk, And yeah, he brought a whole new group in. There was an incredible amount of turnover of players, which you might speak to in a minute, but or you might ask me about. But yeah, it was a massive transition. I was very disappointed Stan was let go.
Obviously, that period under Tim Watson, outside of the first half of that season, was overall a very disappointing time for the footy club. And then there was that transition from Watson to Blight in that 2001 season. Obviously, another influx of young players, experienced players, Gehrig, Hamill, etc. And that's when you moved on to Port. How did that trade happen? Obviously, the trade to get you to Port was one of the reasons that we were able to bring Aaron Hamill into the footy club. But how did that happen from your perspective?
So I suppose through that, Tim's first year, 99, we had a great start to the year. Clarkson was there as an assistant coach who pretty much ran that football program. He had all the IP, a lot of the training drills, and I sort of knew that knowledge of when he went on to coach other sides. So he was a big influence. Kevin Morris came in. I think it was a massive change. I think Tim at that time thought he could do a bit of what Essendon used to do, and bring in different players and turn their careers around. I'm not directly answering your question, but just sort of it would lead into what happened when they released him. But we were a very different club. St Kilda was a very different club. We didn't have them foundations. We didn't have the foundations of success that Essendon had when Sheedy established himself and bringing guys in. And that's financially, that's as far as success. It was, we'd so many wooden spoons. So he probably thought he could bring in certain players into that organisation and turn them around with the quality we had, but it really frayed at what we'd built over that previous 3 months. And that's not to blame individuals, but it was just we needed, I think, just to back the kids who were there and the older guys, but just, continue to improve that. Anyway, leading into 2000, we'd finished awfully in 99 under Tim, and we just couldn't get anything going. There'd been a huge turnover of players at the end of 99. And then we went into that 2000 season. I think we won 3.5 games. My twin brother Shane had an Achilles injury. I was vice captain at the time. I thought we really missed Shane down back and just being a part of that team. There was a lot of guys delisted at the end of 1999. So it was just there was a real change within the group and the chemistry of the group from really the back end of 99. And them decisions, they don't get made for the sake of making decisions. They get made because guys are underperforming. But I think there was a lot of guys pushed out the door too early who had underperformed in the back of that 99 season, which then led to a huge change. And then 2000 was, when they tipped it on its head when Tim got sacked. Obviously, Grant Thomas had his eye on influencing the football department. He was football director at the time, and he quite aggressively pushed that in his direction, along with Brian Waldron. So as early as best and fairest at the end of 2000, and I could feel something happening, and that's how it all evolved.
And just a final one from me. Post your career, obviously you're very close to having premiership reunions with the St Kilda boys from 97. But how often do you sort of stay in touch with that old group? And obviously you've got that connection with Port, but do you keep an eye on the Saints from time to time?
No, I definitely do. Obviously that whole generation, when I was traded back, I've had a couple of tough years, but I still got to know the guys like Rewalt and Kaczynski and some of them guys. I still had great mates with Stewie Lowe and Andrew Thompson and Robert Harvey, and them guys would often Maxie Hudson. So was a big transition through that era, but I keep in touch. Obviously, not so much in the last couple of years with COVID, but I love getting over there, and probably not keeping in touch with the guys as much as we do. But I suppose you just get on with living your life and living your family life. I've obviously remained here in Adelaide. I'm in the pharmacy industry. I have pharmacies here in Adelaide, and life gets busy. But we generally have one catch up a year with the Port Premiership guys, and that's great fun. And we see them, a lot of the guys around at past players events, which is very fortunate here in Adelaide. But the reality is a lot of them guys are assistant coaches or footy managers or what. So, they're still living their football lives as well.
Basically, on field, if you go back to all the players you've played on, who would you say was probably the hardest player to match up on? And if it's not the same player, who was your favourite player to have it just beat up on the day? Like, you have given a real good hiding on the field.
Oh, gee. The toughest bit, David Neitz, he was a power athlete, and for some reason he used to kick dead eye straight whenever I played on him. He seemed to kick 5 or 6 on me, and they'd play an open forward line. He was a very good player. But Wayne Carey at Waverley, playing Pagan's Paddock, you used to get quite nervous. He had lots of space to run. He had a massive engine. He had all the tricks. And even if you kept him quiet for 3 quarters, he'd come out and kick 3 or 4 on you, a couple from 60, and did what he needed to do to get him over the line. So, incredible player. I had a decent record against Matty Lloyd over the journey, even though in that premiership season coming in, I think he kicked 7 on me at the Docklands halfway through that premiership year of 04. But I used to enjoy that rivalry with Lloydie. He was a competitor, but I used to enjoy that matchup along with Richo. Richo was always an interesting character on the field, so always had plenty to whinge about, but I match up pretty good on him.
I have to ask, and Aaron kind of touched on earlier about kind of switching with Shane on the field and some of those sorts of things, but was there ever a time during your period at St Kilda where you and Shane, obviously being identical, that you have some abilities to play pranks on teammates or opponents or coaches or anything like that? Is there one or two that kind of stick out in your mind as kind of the best of the best?
Well, probably the one and only time we seriously considered it, and we were nearly going to try and pull it off. 98 season, I'd been reported for charging against West Coast. It was a game at Waverley, sort of mid-year. We were in a bit of a slump, and we actually got up that day. But the following, Shane had done an ankle. Basically, he was. I got suspended for 2 weeks, and he had an ankle injury out of that game. So there was a few discussions behind the scenes that I would actually play in the number 12 jumper and his place, because I was fine, I was fresh, and I was no worries. I'd come off the game against West Coast. Unfortunately, I was suspended at the time, so there was quite a strong discussion to say who really would know. And the reality was no one would know. I mean, half my teammates didn't know the difference between us. And it was a serious consideration. I'm not sure how the conversation ended up, but I think we saw the common sense in it and decided not to. But in hindsight, it would have been a great story to be able to tell. And I'm not sure what would have happened 10 years later if it had come out as fact, but it certainly would have gone down as a legendary story.
That would have been brilliant. The AFL version of the Fine Cotton. It does make me laugh, the Harry Mackay, Ben Mackay thing, how they never play on each other, and the rumours that there's only one of them. But Darryl, thanks very much for joining us. Great contribution to the Saints over the journey, and obviously with Port Adelaide post St Kilda, and thanks very much for jumping on.
Absolute pleasure, boys. All the best.